Hello everyone, today I want to explore with you in depth an ancient yet highly controversial historical mystery. How much historical basis does the birth of Jesus Christ actually have? And where did the date of Christmas, December 25th, which we celebrate every year, come from? Before beginning our detailed exploration, let me first share with you the three core conclusions of this research. First, regarding the historical authenticity of Jesus' birth, we can confirm that Jesus Christ was indeed a real historical figure, born in Bethlehem of Judea between 6 BC and 1 BCE. Multiple chains of evidence from archaeology, astronomy, and historical documents corroborate each other, supporting the basic reliability of the gospel geographical narratives. However, Jesus' actual birth season was most likely not winter, but autumn, approximately during the Feast of Tabernacles between September and October, or possibly spring. The second conclusion, regarding the origin of December 25th, this date was not simply copied from or meant to replace the birthday of the Roman sun god. According to the earliest documentary evidence, approximately between 204 AD and 221 AD, this date first originated from theological calculations within early Christianity, derived by calculating 9 months forward from March 25th, the date of the Passion or Conception. This was at least 50 to 70 years earlier than 274 AD, when the Roman government promoted the festival of Sol Invictus. The third conclusion, regarding the complexity of the historical process, the establishment of December 25th was a three-stage evolutionary process. The first stage was the theological calculation phase, from 200 AD to 274 AD, a period of independent calculation within Christianity. The second stage was the cultural competition phase, from 274 AD to 336 AD, when Christianity and pagan festivals formed a competitive relationship. The third stage was the strategic transformation phase, after the 4th century AD, when Christianity consciously utilized this date and successfully transformed the cultural customs of the winter solstice. This was not pagan contamination, but rather a successful case of Christianity's creative cultural transformation within classical civilization. Today we will verify these conclusions through 6 academic perspectives. First is historical textual criticism, analyzing the reliability of the New Testament and non-Christian historical sources. Second is astronomical archaeology, using modern astronomical software to trace ancient celestial phenomena. Third is archaeology, examining on-site excavation results. Fourth is calendrical and climatological studies, calculating priestly courses and analyzing seasonal characteristics. Fifth is comparative religious history, investigating the winter solstice celebrations of the Roman Empire. Sixth is contemporary academic critique, reviewing the latest research findings. To determine the year of Jesus' birth, we must begin with a crucial historical event, the death of Herod the Great. Both the Gospels of Matthew and Luke clearly record that Jesus was born during Herod's reign. So when exactly did Herod die? The Jewish historian Josephus records in his Antiquities of the Jews that Herod died after a lunar eclipse but before Passover. This gives us a time point that can be verified with modern astronomy. For a long time, scholars have positioned this lunar eclipse on March 12th to 13th for BC, which was a partial lunar eclipse. That year's Passover was on April 11th, with approximately 29 days between them, just enough to accommodate Josephus' description of Herod's deteriorating condition, funeral preparations, and subsequent political turmoil. Therefore, if Jesus was born before Herod's death, and considering that Herod ordered the killing of all children 2 years old and under, this means Jesus may have been 1 to 2 years old at that time, so Jesus' birth year should be between 6 BC and 4 BC. However, some scholars, such as Jack Finnegan and others, have proposed different revisions. They believe that Herod actually died during the more prominent total lunar eclipse that occurred on January 10th, 1 BC. If this theory is adopted, Jesus' birth date would accordingly be delayed to between 3 BC and 2 BC. Interestingly, this time frame is closer to what the early church fathers said. Tertullian, Eusebius, and others generally believe Jesus was born in the year 751 from the founding of Rome, which is 2 BC. Regardless of which theory is adopted, the basic academic consensus is that Jesus' birth year falls between 6 BC and 1 BC. This is the closest consensus that the current historical community can reach. Next, we need to address a problem that has long troubled scholars, the census of Quirinius mentioned in Luke chapter 2. The Gospel of Luke records, in those days Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria. The problem is that, according to Roman historical records, Quirinius did indeed conduct a famous census in 6 AD, but this was about 10 years after Herod's death, creating an obvious chronological conflict. The academic community currently has several solutions to this. The first is linguistic reinterpretation. Scholars point out that a certain word in Greek can be translated here as before, so this verse can be understood as, this census was conducted before Quirinius became governor of Syria. The second is the dual tenure theory. Archaeologists discovered on a Venetian inscription that Quirinius held multiple positions in the Syrian region. From 12 BC to 1 BC, he had multiple military and diplomatic missions in the eastern provinces. Therefore, he may have supervised census work in the Syrian and Judean regions early on as a special representative of Augustus, even if he was not formally the provincial governor at that time. The third explanation involves the operational logic of the Roman census system. During Augustus' reign, the Roman Empire was experiencing a transition from a republic to imperial administrative centralization. According to the Residential Gesti Divi Augusti, he presided over 3 nationwide citizen registrations during his reign in 28 BC, 8 BC, and 14 AD respectively. Although these mainly targeted Roman citizens, for client kingdoms like Judea under Herod's rule, Augustus would typically require local monarchs to conduct population statistics. Archaeological evidence shows that the Egyptian region maintained a routine census cycle of every 14 years at that time. During the final years of Herod's reign, approximately 8 to 7 BC, because Herod lost Augustus' personal trust and was downgraded from friend to subject, being forced into Roman-style administrative census was completely reasonable. Matthew chapter 2 describes a star that guided the Magi from the east. Was this a miracle or a natural phenomenon that can be explained by modern astronomy? Let's look at several main theories. The first theory is planetary conjunction. In 1603, the great astronomer Johannes Kepler observed the spectacular conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in Ophiuchus. This sparked his historical curiosity. Through precise calculations, Kepler traced back and discovered that a rare triple conjunction occurred in 7 BC, where Jupiter and Saturn met 3 times in 1 year in Pisces. In ancient Near Eastern astrological traditions, Jupiter was called the king's star, representing the birth of rulers. Saturn was regarded as the guardian star of the Jews, a tradition from Babylonian astrology. And Pisces in the Greek astrological system was associated with the Jewish region. For the Persian Magi, the priestly class proficient in astronomy, this celestial phenomenon had extremely strong symbolism, foretelling that a great king would be born in the Jewish region, enough to drive them to embark on a long pilgrimage. Another astronomical candidate event occurred in 2 BC. Jupiter and Venus came extremely close in Leo, which is associated with the Davidic dynasty. The 2 planets almost merged into one, emitting extremely brilliant light. Astronomical calculations show that the angular distance between the 2 stars was less than 0.1 degrees, with a combined magnitude reaching above -4, brighter than Venus alone. To the naked eye, it looked like a super bright new star. But the most exciting discovery comes from cross-cultural astronomical research. The Book of Han, Treatise on Astronomy, records that in the 2nd year of Giant Pain under Emperor Ai of Han, which is March 5th BC, a comet or broom star appeared near Higu, which is Aquila. This comet remained visible for more than 70 days, which is key. NASA scientist Mark Kidger published groundbreaking research in the Journal of the British Astronomical Association, proposing the concept of temporary geocentric synchronous motion. If a comet passes by Earth at an extremely close distance, approximately 380,000 to 400,000 kilometers, equivalent to the Earth-Moon distance, and its relative velocity achieves some balance with Earth's rotation speed in the line of sight direction, then during a specific time period, this comet would appear stationary in the sky. Kidger further pointed out that on a morning in June 5 BC, if observed from Jerusalem looking south toward Bethlehem, this comet might have been positioned exactly on the southern sky's meridian, and in the observer's eyes, continued to stop over Bethlehem for about 2 hours. This matches the Gospel of Matthew's record astonishingly. The star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. This description of stopping received a scientific explanation in terms of physical kinematics. The Magi from the East were not kings in the traditional sense, but rather a priestly class originating from Media or Persia, proficient in mathematics, astronomy, and astrology. Research shows these scholars may have been familiar with Jewish prophecies circulating in the East, such as in Numbers 2400:17, a star will come out of Jacob. For the Magi, a comet that could remain stationary in the sky was not only a natural phenomenon but also a celestial sign with divine significance, foretelling the establishment of a new order. In the past, skeptics argued that Nazareth simply did not exist in the 1st century, or that the Bethlehem birth story was purely theological literature fabricated to fulfill Old Testament prophecy. However, archaeological excavations since the mid-20th century have provided solid physical evidence for these geographical backgrounds. In 1962, during archaeological excavations at Caesarea Maritima, a Hebrew marble inscription was discovered that completely changed academic views of Nazareth. This inscription lists the relocation sites of the 24 priestly courses throughout Palestine after the destruction of the Jerusalem Temple. It clearly records that the 18th course, the family of Hapatzes, settled in Nazareth. This was the first concrete evidence of Nazareth appearing in non-Christian literature, proving that the village did indeed exist in the 1st to 2nd centuries and had the conditions to accommodate priestly families, indicating it was not an insignificant small settlement. During archaeological work beneath the modern Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth, archaeologists discovered agricultural facilities from around the turn of the era, including cellars for storing grain, stone olive press equipment, and typical 1st century pottery shards. These remains depict the true face of a small Galilean hill country village. Based on archaeological evidence, 1st century Nazareth had a population of approximately 300 to 500 people, covering an area of about 4 to 6 hectares, a typical small Galilean hill country village. This perfectly matches Nathanael's reaction in the Gospel of John, Nazareth. Can anything good come from there? This contemptuous tone precisely reflects that Nazareth was indeed a tiny, insignificant village at that time. The Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem is one of the most continuous holy sites in human history. As early as the 2nd century AD, local Christians were already identifying a specific cave as Jesus' birthplace. In 135 AD, after suppressing the Second Jewish Revolt, Roman Emperor Hadrian established a pagan temple dedicated to Adonis above this cave. This was Rome's common religious suppression tactic. But this suppressive action inadvertently marked the location of the original Christian holy site for later archaeologists. If this place was not important in Christian hearts, Hadrian would not have specifically built a pagan temple here to suppress it. In the 4th century AD, Helena, mother of Constantine the Great, removed the Adonis temple and built the first great church on the site. Although the original church was destroyed in the Samaritan Revolt of 529, Emperor Justinian subsequently rebuilt it, which is the basic framework of the Church of the Nativity we see today. The latest restoration work was carried out between 2013 and 2020, revealing exquisite mosaics and original Constantinian floors, proving the building's rigorous preservation of the site's historical memory since the 4th century. Regarding the archaeological interpretation of the manger, scholars have offered important insights. The inn mentioned in Luke 2 verse 7, Greek kataluma, in contemporary Palestinian residences actually refers to a guest room or upstairs living room, not a commercial inn. The real Greek word for commercial inn is different. When Mary and Joseph arrived at the home of relatives in Bethlehem, the upstairs guest room was already full of relatives due to the census registration, so they were placed in a ground-level shed or livestock area. Such spaces were typically natural or artificial caves connected to the main house, used to shelter livestock on cold nights. In these spaces, archaeological discoveries have found stone or wooden feeding vessels, which are mangers. Jesus was not born in a wilderness stable, but rather was born in a warm yet crowded typical Jewish family environment. This understanding of first-century residential structure brings the gospel narrative back from romanticized myth to real social history. Although we celebrate Christmas in December, historical evidence strongly suggests that Jesus was more likely born in autumn or spring. This conclusion is mainly based on precise tracing back of John the Baptist's birth time and observations of the climate and ecology of the Judean hills. The Gospel of Luke provides precise data on the age difference between Jesus and John the Baptist. Luke chapter 1 records, in the time of Herod king of Judea there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. An angel appeared to him, saying his wife Elizabeth would give him a son. Then, in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to appear to Mary, telling her, "Even Elizabeth your relative is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month." Therefore, Jesus was born about 6 months after John the Baptist. Zechariah belonged to the division of Abijah, which was the 8th of the 24 priestly courses. According to 1 Chronicles 24, King David established a priestly rotation system of 24 courses. Each course served for 1 week, from Sabbath to Sabbath. During the 3 major festivals, Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacles, all priests needed to serve together. The annual cycle began on the 1st of Nisan, approximately March-April in the solar calendar. Let us calculate Zechariah's service time. The 1st of Nisan was approximately March 15th, the beginning of the year. Passover was on Nisan 14 to 21, all priests serving. The first course began after Passover, around early April. Each course served 1 week, which is 7 days. After calculation, the 8th course, the division of Abijah, considering full priestly service during Pentecost, should have been in Sivan, approximately early to mid-June in the solar calendar. After Zechariah's service ended, he returned to his home in the Judean hills, approximately late June. Elizabeth conceived immediately, around late June to early July. So when was Mary's conception? Luke's Gospel says in the 6th month, the angel appeared to Mary. From late June plus 6 months is late December to early January, corresponding to the end of Kislev or beginning of Tebet in the Jewish calendar, right during Hanukkah. 9 months after Elizabeth's conception, that is, from early July plus 9 months, John the Baptist should have been born in late March to early April of the following year, corresponding to Nisan in the Jewish calendar, right during Passover. This has deep theological significance. John the Baptist born during Passover foreshadows that he is the forerunner of the Passover lamb. What about Jesus? From Mary's conception in late December to early January, plus 9 months, would be late September to early October, corresponding to Tishri in the Jewish calendar, right during the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is an important Jewish festival. Leviticus 23 records, "Live in temporary shelters for 7 days, so your descendants will know that I had the Israelites live in temporary shelters when I brought them out of Egypt." John 1 verse 14 says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us." This word dwelling, the Greek root is tabernacle, literally pitched his tent among us. This echoes the Tabernacles of the Feast of Tabernacles, suggesting Jesus may have indeed been born during the Feast of Tabernacles. Besides the calculation of priestly courses, climatology also provides counter-evidence. Luke 2 verse 8 records, "There were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night." This detail of being in the fields at night is important. Bethlehem is located in the Judean hills, at an elevation of about 775 meters, with a Mediterranean climate. December is the rainy season, cold and damp, with nighttime temperatures often below 10 degrees Celsius, frequent frost, occasional snow. Under such climate conditions, Jewish shepherding tradition was to move flocks to protected barns or caves, not to stay outdoors overnight. In contrast, September to October is the most pleasant season in Palestine's climate, with nighttime temperatures around 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, vegetation still available for grazing, the rainy season not yet begun, the most suitable season for outdoor activities. Ancient shepherding campsites discovered near Bethlehem show main usage times were spring and autumn seasons, not winter. So based on precise calculation of priestly courses and climatological evidence, we can say with considerable confidence that Jesus' actual birth season was most likely not winter in December, but autumn from September to October, right during the Feast of Tabernacles. Since Jesus most likely was not born in December, why is Christmas set on December 25th? This question has sparked intense debate in the academic world for several centuries. Currently, there are two main theories. Today, I'll first introduce the first theory, which is the calculation hypothesis. The calculation hypothesis holds that December 25th completely originated from theological calculations by early Christians, unrelated to pagan festivals. What is the core logic of this theory? In early Judaism and Christianity, there existed a profound theological aesthetic concept called the integral age. This theory held that great prophets should die on the same day as their conception or birth, symbolizing the perfect completion of life, beginning and ending in harmony. The Babylonian Talmud has similar records that great patriarchs should be born and die on the same day, symbolizing the integrity of sacred life, embodying the symmetric beauty of God's creation. Early church fathers applied this concept to Christ. Since Christ was the perfect man, his life journey should have perfect symmetry, therefore the conception date should equal the passion date. The early Western Church, that is, the churches in Rome and North Africa, through conversion of the Jewish calendar, set the passion date on March 25th, corresponding to Nisan 14 in the Jewish calendar, the day the Passover lamb was slain. So how was the theological calculation performed? Since March 25th was the passion date, according to the integral age principle, this day should also be the conception date, that is, the day the angel announced to Mary. Why not the birth date? Because the passion marks the accomplishment of redemption, while conception marks the beginning of the incarnation. Both are crucial moments of the union of God and man, therefore more symmetrical theologically. March 25th later became the Feast of the Annunciation in the Western Church, commemorating the angel's announcement to Mary. The final step was physiological calculation. Calculating 9 months of physiological pregnancy forward from March 25th, the conception date, yields December 25th as the birth date. This is the complete logical chain of the calculation hypothesis. Passion date equals March 25th. Conception date also equals March 25th, plus 9 months of pregnancy equals birth date December 25th. What is the most crucial evidence here? It is the temporal priority of early documents. Hippolytus was an early church father in Rome, living approximately 170 to 235 AD. In his commentary on Daniel, written between 204 to 211 AD, he clearly recorded, "The first advent of our Lord in the flesh, when he was born in Bethlehem, was on December 25th, Wednesday, in the 42nd year of Augustus." This is the earliest document discovered that mentions December 25th. What is the significance of this timing? Let's look at the timeline. Hippolytus mentioned December 25th between 204 to 211 AD. Roman Emperor Aurelian established the festival of Sol Invictus in 274 AD. The two are separated by 63 to 70 years. That is to say, Christian discussion of December 25th was at least 63 years earlier than Rome's official promotion of the sun god festival. Is there other evidence? Yes. Sextus Julius Africanus, living 160 to 240 AD, in his Chronicle of World History compiled in 221 AD, set Christ's conception date as March 25th, which is the spring equinox. This implies December 25th, 9 months later, as the birth date. This was 53 years earlier than Sol Invictus. There is another very strong but often overlooked piece of evidence, which is the Donatists. The Donatists were a separatist faction of the North African Church who broke with the mainstream Church after the Great Persecution of 312 AD. They were known for being extremely conservative, holding fast to tradition, refusing compromise, resolutely opposing Roman political interference in the Church. St. Augustine mentioned in his writings that the Donatist churches in North Africa consistently celebrated Christmas on December 25th. Here we can use proof by contradiction. If December 25th was a pagan substitute festival invented by Constantine the Great or Roman officials only after 312 AD, then the Donatists who strongly opposed Roman political interference would never have accepted it. But they were indeed celebrating December 25th. Therefore, this date must have been an established tradition before 312 AD. The Eastern Church provides another interesting piece of evidence. The Eastern Church, especially the Church in Alexandria, adopted a different Passion date but used the same calculation logic. Their Passion or conception date was April 6th, plus 9 months of pregnancy, yielding a birth date of January 6th. This is why the Eastern Orthodox and some Eastern churches still celebrate Christmas or Epiphany on January 6th to this day. What does this regional difference actually prove? It proves this was not the result of copying from some pagan festival, but rather each local church independently using the same theological calculation method. Because the starting points were different, they arrived at different results. This is precisely evidence of internal development rather than external borrowing. What is the core claim of the calculation hypothesis? It is that December 25th was initially a date derived through theological calculation within Christianity. This calculation system already existed before the Sun God Festival was widely promoted. This is the complete exposition of the first theory. Now let's look at the second theory, which is the history of religions hypothesis. This hypothesis was extremely popular in the 18th and 19th centuries, holding that the Church overlaid Christ's birthday onto the Roman Sun God Festival in order to weaken pagan influence. First, we need to understand the background of the Roman Empire's winter solstice celebrations. One of Rome's most popular festivals was Saturnalia, occurring December 17th to 23rd, later extended to December 25th. This festival commemorated the god Saturn, featuring temporary inversion of social order. During Saturnalia, masters served slaves, symbolizing Golden Age equality. People exchanged gifts, usually candles and small figurines, which later influenced the Christmas gift tradition. There were feasts and revelry, drinking, gambling, year-end collective indulgence. People lit candles, symbolizing light, because daylight lengthened after the winter solstice. Indeed, many modern Christmas customs, such as exchanging gifts, lighting candles, family gatherings, have superficial similarities to Saturnalia. In the ancient Roman calendar, the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, was set on December 25th. What was the symbolic significance of the winter solstice? Darkness reached its peak, after which daylight began to lengthen, symbolizing light conquering darkness, the sun reborn or unconquered. This symbolism was universal in the Mediterranean world, not limited to one religion. In 274 AD, Roman Emperor Aurelian took major measures to unify the empire's religious beliefs. At that time, the Roman Empire faced political division, economic crisis, needing a religious symbol that could unify East and West. Sun worship was very popular in eastern provinces like Syria and Egypt. Aurelian established the birthday festival of Sol Invictus on December 25, 274 AD, built a great temple of the sun god in Rome's Campus Martius, and minted coins bearing the image of Sol Invictus. In the chronography of 354 AD, we see two entries side by side. December 25th is marked as Birthday of the Unconquered and simultaneously marked as Christ born in Bethlehem of Judea. The two listed together, does this suggest some kind of competitive or syncretic relationship? Besides Sol Invictus, there was also the influence of Mithraism. Mithraic worship originated from Persian Zoroastrianism, was extremely popular in the Roman military, spreading widely in the Roman Empire from the 1st to 4th centuries. Mithraism's core belief was that Mithras, god of light, was born from rock, slaughtered the cosmic bull to create life, symbolizing the force of light in the struggle between good and evil. Mithraism and Christianity had some superficial similarities. For example, Mithras born from rock, Christ from virgin conception, both miraculous births. Mithras possibly born on December 25th, Christianity later said on December 25th, overlapping dates. Mithraism had a communion ritual using bread and wine. Christianity also had communion using bread and wine, similar rituals. Both had baptism rituals as initiation rites. However, modern scholars have raised serious questions about evidence of Mithras' December 25th birthday. First, lack of early evidence. No documents before the 4th century AD clearly mention Mithras being born on December 25th. Second, possible reverse influence. Mithraism may have adopted this date only after Christianity established December 25th. Third, regional variations. Mithraic worship had different mythological versions in different regions. What is the core argument of the history of religions hypothesis? It is Christianity's strategic cultural transformation. After Constantine, that is, after the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, Christianity transitioned from being persecuted to being legal, needing to attract large numbers of pagan converts, facing the challenge of how to handle pagan customs. What was the cultural strategy? Rather than completely prohibiting festivals the populace loved, better to Christianize them, giving them new theological meaning. How was the appropriation of symbolic meaning carried out? Winter solstice equals light beginning to increase. Christ equals the Son of Righteousness. This is the prophecy of Malachi 4 verse 2. The two symbolic meanings fit perfectly. Early church fathers like St. Augustine said in Christmas sermons, "Let us celebrate this day, not because of the sun, but because of the Lord who created the sun." Christ chose to be born on the shortest day to let us see that from this day on, daylight begins to increase, symbolizing that his light will increase. John Chrysostom in a sermon at Antioch in 386 AD mentioned, in the West, they have celebrated this festival on December 25th from ancient times. But he also said, this day is also the day the birthday of the unconquered is celebrated, but who is truly unconquered? It is our Lord who conquered death. What do these sermons suggest? The Church Fathers consciously linked Christ with solar symbolism, intending to replace pagan sun worship with Christian doctrine. This was a competitive replacement, from pagan festival birthday of Sol Invictus, through Christian reinterpretation Christ is the true sun, to new Christian festival Christ's birthday. Customs also had continuity and transformation. Original pagan gift exchange custom from Saturnalia transformed to commemorate the Magi's gifts, now Christmas gifts. Lighting candles, originally a winter solstice custom, transformed to symbol of Christ as light of the world, now Christmas candles. Evergreen tree decoration, originally symbol of life, transformed to hope of eternal life, now Christmas tree. Feast gatherings, originally Saturnalia custom, transformed to celebrate Christ's birth, now Christmas dinner. What is the core claim of the history of religion's hypothesis? It is that December 25th may have overlapped with Roman sun god festivals, Christianity after Constantine consciously utilized this date, successfully transforming pagan winter solstice celebration customs. In the past 20 years, the academic world has raised more and more questions and revisions to the popular claim that Christmas equals the sun god festival. Dutch scholar Stephen Hijmans in his authoritative work systematically challenged the traditional pagan origin theory. What are his core findings? First, documentary evidence for the Sol Invictus festival is extremely weak. Hijmans carefully examined all existing Roman documents and found that when Aurelian established the Sol Invictus festival in 274 AD, no contemporary documents clearly recorded December 25th. From 274 AD to 336 AD, a full 80 years, no documents mention celebrating the sun god on December 25th. The first clear record is in the chronography of 354 AD. By 362 AD, Julian the Apostate celebrated the sun god on this day. Only then was there clear evidence. What is the key finding? In the full 80 years between Aurelian establishing Sol Invictus in 274 AD and the chronography of 354 AD, there is no documentary evidence showing Romans celebrated the sun god's birthday on December 25th on a large scale. Second, the dual recording in the 354 calendar may have a different interpretation. The chronography of 354 recorded two entries on December 25th, birthday of the unconquered, and Christ born in Bethlehem of Judea. Traditional interpretation holds Christianity borrowed the pagan date. What is Hijmans' new interpretation? The order and context of the two entries suggests that Christian celebration may have been earlier, and pagans may have established a competitive festival on the same day to counter Christianity. American liturgical scholar Thomas Talley in his classic work systematically defended the calculation hypothesis. He emphasized we must pay attention to the chronological order of documentary evidence. Around 200 AD, Tertullian mentioned the connection of March 25th with the Passion. 204 to 211 AD, Hippolytus explicitly mentioned December 25th. 221 AD, Africanus conception date calculation. 274 AD, Aurelian established Sol Invictus, but no clear evidence of December 25th. Before 312 AD, Donatists already celebrating December 25th. 336 AD, first document clearly recording both Christian and pagan festivals on December 25th. What is the logical inference? If Christianity's December 25th tradition appeared earlier in documents, then the claim of borrowing from paganism doesn't hold up. Talley also pointed out that the different calculations of the birth date by Eastern and Western churches, West using December 25th, East using January 6th, proves this was the result of internal theological derivation, not external borrowing. If December 25th was purely to replace Sol Invictus, why would the Eastern Church independently develop January 6th? This doesn't fit the logic of the pagan substitution theory. Historian William Tye in his research article proposed a subversive viewpoint called the reverse influence theory. Not Christianity copying paganism, but paganism copying Christianity. What is the argumentative logic? Step 1. Christians first selected December 25th, based on internal theological calculation, around 200 to 221 AD, gradually spreading among Christian communities throughout the Roman Empire, though not an official festival, already becoming a folk celebration tradition. Step 2. Aurelian saw Christianity's influence. By the 270s AD, Christianity already had considerable scale in the Roman Empire. Christians' informal celebration activities during the winter solstice period attracted attention. Aurelian decided to establish an official sun god festival to counter Christianity's influence. Step 3. Competitive festival establishment. Aurelian established Sol Invictus in 274 AD, possibly intentionally choosing the same day, December 25th, for the winter solstice, with the purpose of drawing the populace back from Christianity to traditional polytheism. What is the evidence for step 4? In 362 AD, Julian the Apostate, this emperor who attempted to restore paganism, held a grand sun god celebration on December 25th. This precisely proves that paganism needed to compete with Christianity on the same day. This kind of reverse influence is not rare in history. Hadrian built pagan temples on Christian holy sites to suppress in 135 AD. Julian restored pagan festivals to counter Christianity in 361 to 363 AD. The establishment of Sol Invictus in 274 AD may also have been an attempt to counter Christian influence. What was Sol Invictus' actual influence? Modern archaeology has conducted systematic statistics on temple sites throughout the Roman Empire. Jupiter had over 500 temples, over 3,000 inscriptions, highest influence. Venus had over 300 temples, over 2,000 inscriptions, very high influence. Mithras had over 200 temples, over 1,000 inscriptions, medium-high influence in the military. Sol Invictus only had 50 to 100 temples, 300 to 500 inscriptions, medium low influence. Christianity in the 4th century had over 100 churches, over 500 inscriptions, rapidly rising influence. What is the key finding? Sol Invictus was never the most important deity of the Roman Empire, its influence far less than traditional Olympian gods. Even more surprising, after Aurelian's death, that is 275 AD, Sol Invictus was quickly neglected. 275 to 337 AD, Sol Invictus almost no documentary records. 337 to 361 AD, Christianity became dominant. 361 to 363 AD, Julian briefly revived sun worship. After 363 AD, sun worship completely declined. What is Hidgman's conclusion? The establishment of Sol Invictus was more like Aurelian's personal political project rather than a deep religious tradition of Roman society. It never truly became a festival widely celebrated by the populace. Regarding Saturnalia, traditional theory holds Saturnalia was on December 25th, so Christmas borrowed from Saturnalia. But what are the historical facts? In the Republican period, Saturnalia was December 17th, only one day. In the Augustan period, Saturnalia was December 17th to 19th, 3 days. In the late Empire period, Saturnalia was December 17th to 23rd, 7 days. What is the key question? Even in the longest case, Saturnalia ended on December 23rd, still a 2-day gap from December 25th. If Christianity really wanted to replace Saturnalia, why not choose the climax of Saturnalia on December 17th or 19th, but instead choose the 25th, 2 days after the festival ended? This instead suggests the choice of December 25th was unrelated to Saturnalia. There is another easily confusing point, which is the universality of solar symbolism. Symbols like light conquering darkness, sun rebirth, are universal responses to the natural phenomenon of the winter solstice, not the monopoly of any specific religion. All global civilizations have winter solstice celebrations. China has the Winter Solstice Festival, symbolizing yin-yang transformation, yang energy beginning to grow. Celts had Yule, symbolizing sun god rebirth. Persia had Yalda night, symbolizing light conquering darkness. India had Makar Sankranti, symbolizing the sun's northward journey. Judaism had Hanukkah, commemorating the temple light, around December. What is the academic conclusion? Christianity's use of light symbolism does not prove it borrowed from Roman sun worship. First, solar symbolism already existed in the Bible. Malachi 4 verse 2 says, "Son of righteousness." John 8 verse 12 says Jesus is the light of the world. Isaiah 9 verse 2 says great light in darkness. Second, the symbolic meaning of the winter solstice is universal. Any civilization at the winter solstice will have similar symbolic associations. This is humanity's common response to nature, not borrowing. Third, sharing of symbols does not equal borrowing of origins. Two religions can independently use the same natural symbol. Based on the above critical analysis, contemporary academia tends toward a more nuanced, more complex historical picture. The establishment of December 25th was a three-stage evolutionary process. The first stage was independent origin, from 200 AD to 274 AD. Early Christian communities, based on integral age theology, calculated March 25th conception leading to December 25th birth, beginning in formal celebration within a small range. The characteristics of this stage were no official recognition, regional variations, East using January 6th, purely theological motivation. The second stage was competition and confrontation, from 274 AD to 336 AD. Christianity celebrated in December, folk tradition gradually spreading, continuing in formal celebration. Meanwhile, Roman officials saw a threat. Aurelian established Sol Invictus in 274 AD. Julian revived sun worship in 362 AD. Both sides competed on the same day, possibly mutually influencing, but not one-way borrowing, Christianity gradually gaining the upper hand. The third stage was officialization and transformation, after 336 AD. Constantine issued the Edict of Milan supporting Christianity in 313 AD. Christianity gained legal status. The Church began to formalize Christmas celebrations, first recorded in 336 AD. Consciously strengthened the contrast between Christ and the Sun God, gradually absorbed folk customs like gifts, candles, etc., ultimately completely replacing pagan festivals. The characteristics of this stage were official recognition, cultural transformation strategy, custom fusion. What is the core of contemporary academic consensus? December 25th initially came from theological calculation within Christianity. This is the calculation hypothesis. Then in interaction with Roman pagan culture, it was consciously strengthened and utilized by church leaders, ultimately successfully transforming the pagan winter solstice celebration. This is the history of religion's hypothesis. This is not a contradiction, but rather the complexity of history. From 200 AD to 274 AD, the dominant factor was the calculation hypothesis. The historical dynamic was internal theological derivation. From 274 AD to 313 AD, the dominant factor was bidirection competition. The historical dynamic was Christianity versus paganism struggle. From 313 AD to 400 AD, the dominant factor was cultural transformation. The historical dynamic was Christianity strategically transforming an already selected date. How is the specific evidence integrated? Evidence supporting the calculation hypothesis as the starting point includes Hippolytus 204 to 211 AD earlier than Sol Invictus 274 AD. Africanus 221 AD independent calculation. Donatist conservative tradition before 312 AD. Eastern Church parallel development using January 6. Evidence supporting cultural transformation as a process includes Church Fathers consciously using solar symbolism, like Augustine, Chrysostom. 4th century onward custom fusion, like gifts, candles. Church utilizing already existing date to counter pagan influence. Returning to our initial question, was December 25th internal church theological calculation or adapted from the sun god's birthday? The answer is, first calculation, then used for transformation. What is a more precise formulation? First, origin. December 25th initially originated from 2nd to 3rd century Christians' theological calculation of Jesus' conception date, at least half a century earlier than the widespread celebration of Sol Invictus. Second, competition. When Aurelian established the sun god festival in 274 AD, Christianity and paganism formed bidirectional competition on the date of December 25th. We cannot rule out that Aurelian may have chosen this day to counter Christian influence. Third, transformation. After Christianity's legalization in the 4th century, church leaders consciously utilized this already selected date, through theological interpretation and liturgical development, successfully Christianized the cultural customs of the winter solstice. Fourth, result. This was not copying paganism, but rather a successful case of Christianity absorbing, transforming, and reconstructing cultural heritage in interaction with classical civilization. After this in-depth historical exploration, I hope everyone can maintain humility toward history, acknowledging that our understanding of antiquity is always limited, willing to adjust understanding with new evidence, not easily believing simplified claims. Maintain confidence in faith. The core historical facts are reliable. Jesus' birth is not myth but history. December 25th, though not the exact date, has profound theological significance. Maintain openness to culture, recognizing that Christianity's interaction with civilization is rich. Cultural transformation does not equal faith compromise. God can work through human culture. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John 1 verse 14 NIV, December 25th may not be Jesus' actual birthday, but when we celebrate Christmas on this day, we commemorate that great event that changed human history. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us, full of grace and truth. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. This is the true meaning of Christmas, not the specific date, but the wonderful truth of God entering human history to be with us. If you want to know more about today's information or other content, please leave a comment below. Thank you for your support. I hope you can subscribe, enable notifications, and share to support this channel to continue, and to learn more, you can also visit my Patreon. Let us together know God, reflect on faith, and live out Christ.